This is Derek Bros with the Conscious Resistance Network, and today I'm talking with an old friend and someone I've interviewed several times, Mr. Adam Kokesh, who really needs no introduction, especially to my audience. How you doing, Adam?
Outstanding. Yourself?
Doing good, man. Happy to talk with you and catch up and see where your world's at, what you got coming up for 2016, and just a few other issues I guess I wanted to hear your opinion on, really related to the state of the current quote-unquote American libertarian movement and the larger, more anarchist, individualist anarchist strain, anarcho-capitalist strain. Really, I don't know, man, I've been seeing some disturbing things looking at the 2016 election, and so I wanted to start there and then really get into your own ideas about your campaign in 2020. But first, have you noticed, from your viewpoint, have you seen these faux libertarian anarchists starting to support Donald Trump and ideas like borders, and then maybe even, obviously in a free society, people can be racist if they want, but I've seen this really ugly side of people coming out, and I don't know if it's just been there the whole time and now they're feeling safe because somebody like Donald Trump's talking about it, but what have you seen on that?
Hold on, there's a new word for it, isn't there, too? Like what is it?
Neo-reactionary.
Yeah, that's it, neo-reactionary. And I'm like, how desperate do you have to be to find meaning in your life that you're putting words together like that in order to justify the support of Donald Trump, and at the same time claiming that you, in some twisted way, believe in freedom? Like, wow, yeah, no, I know, and I'm happy to talk to you about this in a real exploratory way, because I have some reactionary thoughts, and I don't think a lot of people are having a really conscientious conversation about this. But yeah, it's a weird intellectual anti-intellectualism. I don't know if they would take issue with that, but to me, the bigger lesson, and I guess it's navel gazing up into the point where you can say there's about 1 million of us, and I stand by that, and that was the consensus that we had on this last national tour, that there are in America about 1 million people, that's 1 in 320-something million Americans, who get freedom on a philosophical level. And I suppose these people might be like right on the edge, and now you go, oh crap, no, you couldn't even be close. But these are people that you thought were close before, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at least you were hopeful for, and then you see them take this massive step back, and I guess it just makes me think, that there is, I hate to just go to the confirmation. How does this confirm my worldview? Get into my own confirmation bias here, but two things. One, that there are a lot of people who are seemingly close to voluntarism politically, who we want to get excited about and we want to debate with. Like someone like Rand Paul. You want to debate. You're like, wow. He's so much closer. He's very strongly hitting on some themes that are important to those of us who believe in freedom philosophically or who think of freedom as a principle. And the thing is, you could argue with someone like that till you're blue in the face, because someone who goes, the Constitution is the answer to everything. And I was there myself. I got to be really humble here, because it took me a total of 10 years to go through my own process of awareness. But there was a period where I was like, yes, I've got it, because I figured out the Constitution. This is the be-all, end-all of everything. And if we just follow the Constitution, everything would be hunky-dory in America again. And you get past that phase, usually on your own. And I think that there are the neo-reactionaries are kind of stuck in this weird intellectual feedback loop where they're afraid to make the leap until they've gone through a certain number of these weird spirals a few times before they finally accept it. So is there a point in talking to them and engaging with them? Who cares? I think when Trump's done one way or another, hopefully, before the end of the election cycle, as opposed to 4 or 8 years later, I don't think it's going to be a big lasting phenomenon that we should really, waste, spill too much ink over. I don't think it's too big a deal, but it is worth examining and taking some lessons from. And the most important one is that there are more people out there in the general public who are receptive to this message than the people who are, like I was, really intellectually stubborn and had to figure stuff out the hard way for ourselves.
What do you say to those who who might take a stance as far as supporting Trump's ideas on borders, simply because they think that basically they're taking the stance that an open borders argument or no lack of immigration is not a libertarian stance, and so then instead of that they're open to supporting some kind of state, because to me I don't see how you can really close down the borders to any group of people or in general, and not have a state or at least some sort of heavily militarized presence there, which I don't think that's going to be bringing us any closer to freedom. I mean, so what do you say to those who, outside of just some sort of neo-reactionary support of Trump, those who think that it's a mistake for libertarians to believe that we can realistically have a open borders policy?
I got to call out Lou Rockwell on this.
Yeah.
I was really shocked and disappointed that, so the story that he wrote for LouRockwell.com, which is generally, a good repository of libertarian intellectual thought. There are a lot of really smart and talented people who write there. But I would say it's, almost becoming a movement backwater now. Gosh, I might get in trouble for saying something like that. I should hand it to Lou for all of his major faults for, the involvement with the racist newsletters and everything. He's contributed a lot. He's held down a lot for this movement. He's done a lot. He's brought a lot of people into it. And I don't want to, not give that credit where it's due. But when you see him doing something like this, and I can't say I don't want to be taken as some, intellectual authority myself, but, rather as someone who applies reason in a way that resonates with my audience and people appreciate. And you should be the judge of that for yourself. And I'm not the only one saying this, but I would hope that, that I could have a little more intellectual consistency at this point than to make this twisted justification for borders. And I'm open to hearing it. Like when I read Lou Rockwell's piece, and I was thinking that you can, like with lots of things that government does, you can show how they're legitimate services, right? That they're approximations of legitimate services. Like building roads is not a bad thing. It's just that government does it very inefficiently, very badly, and in a very corrupt way. But it's a good thing that it does. And it's a legitimate question in a sense to say, who would build the roads? Like compared to war. Who's going to start the wars without government? No one. That's the point, right? But with private property, you can kind of make a leap and attempt to say that controlling, restricting movements. Now, if you call it freedom of movement, then yes, you're implying that it's a moral violation. But if you're restricting the movement of people on the basis of private property, that's a legitimate service. Like when I own a piece of land, I want to be able to control who comes on and off of it. I might want to live in a big collective where, we have a common defense force that controls who comes in and out of our land. But to say we're going to have a government do that, you still have to make this ridiculous leap of logic. And if you read Lou Rockwell's piece critically, there are a couple obvious leaps and one giant hole in the middle where you go, no, this doesn't really hold up, and it becomes a very dangerous justification for what is the core of government. And we can play the definition game all day, but most of us define government with some inclusion of monopoly on force or violence or coercion, and something to do with geography, as in a territorial monopoly. And even if you give government the legitimacy to be a land monopoly, even if nothing else, you open the door for everything else, because you've thrown out the fundamental ethical premise of private property and freedom of movement and setting up arbitrary bounds based on what really comes down to it, and you'll appreciate this in this way. For a lot of people, it's probably getting a bit esoteric, but what gets into appropriate standards of homesteading. You know, it's appropriate for me to homestead 10 acres, 40 acres, 100 acres, even 1,000 acres if I'm going to start a community that, you know, and no one else is, you know, claiming that 1,000 acres, and I'm saying that I'm going to put it to good use, and no one, you know, people respect that. But to say I am going to establish a government that is, you know, homesteading the entire continent from here to there, and, you know, we own everything in here, and you live at the pleasure of the king, essentially, the sovereign government. That's really sick. That's really what you're supposed to be against.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's why I've been just sitting here. Like you said, I think in the long run, this will be sort of just something that passes, and hopefully many of these people get past this stage or this phase. But at the same time, there is quite a group of people, and at least I think it's more on the internet. I don't think there's too many people who are actively engaged like you and I are in creating a better world today and in the future.
There's a dimension of this, if I may, I want to ask you about before I move on, because, you know, I hit on the sort of political, philosophical, but there's an obvious psychological, cultural component to this of fear of outsiders and insecurity.
Absolutely.
And, you know, your activism is, you know, your awareness is much more on a spiritual, and obviously I talk about the psychological a lot, but do you see that this is, like, obviously this is a manifestation of a longer-term trend that I hope is something that is diminishing. Do you see anything to counter that? Like, how is this being overcome spiritually?
Well, I think that for me, you know, because I've done several videos on this the past couple of days and just been really going over these, the reason that this is popping up and trying to understand this viewpoint. And, you know, you touched on some of these as far as, you know, respecting property rights and still being able to restrict movement on your property, but not taking that to the stance of becoming the state. And I've seen some people, I was actually just reading an essay that talks about the fears of, what is it called? It says, defending our culture from invaders, and just that type of mentality where people, you know, think that there's something in America, in the USA, that they're trying to preserve this culture, and whatever that culture may be, and the fear of outsiders, the others. This is just, you know, a process that's happened for a long time, and really, you can look back through history and with natives. And I was reading a speech from Russell Means, a Native American activist, called "For America to Live, Europe Must Die," and he's just talking about the culture and this mindset that infects people, and you know, just saying how first they have to dehumanize somebody. Politicians do it, corporations do it, soldiers do it. You have to dehumanize the other person, the enemy, and then make people, you know, afraid of them so that you can justify all kinds of crazy things. I mean, just this morning there was an article from Glenn Greenwald saying that people who are calling to limit free speech are worse than ISIS, because you've had Slate, the New York Times, and several other, you know, well-known papers writing that it's time to reconsider the First Amendment because ISIS's rhetoric is too dangerous online, so we need to start curtailing free speech. And then Trump saying, you know, we need to, you know, ban Muslims from coming in. And then there's another representative, some Republicans, saying we need to have mosques on 24/7 surveillance. And these type of ideas are getting support. You know, they're definitely getting support, and it's coming from that reactionary place. And I think it's definitely being driven by fear. So to counter that, the best method to counter that is, for one, to be aware, because when you start to really look at these topics and analyze them from the philosophical perspective, the psychological perspective, and then also just understanding how nuanced they are by looking, okay, well, the United States helped create and fund ISIS and helped create and at least contribute to this refugee crisis. So I think there's a bigger picture. People want us to be afraid. People want us to be divided. There is absolutely people out there who take up this extreme radical Islam, you know, philosophy, and who believe it wholeheartedly, but they're not, in my opinion, my research, not nearly as strong as the media and the government would like us to believe. So they're just driving that fear, driving that division, and getting people to give up on the idea of true freedom and be like, oh, well, look, we tried it, but, which is essentially what people like Cantwell and Molyneux and some others seem to be saying, that basically the philosophy works to a certain point, but it doesn't reflect reality that we're dealing with. So in order to, you know, survive, we must, you know, suppress the other side or something. I mean, I'm not really sure.
Wait. What's Molyneux saying about this, really?
Well, I don't know if Molyneux would label himself a neo-reactionary like Cantwell has, but definitely, he's been, if not, I'm not going to say he's endorsed Trump because I don't really follow him too much anymore, real specifically, but I check out the videos periodically, and I definitely see that he's been driving this, the message of, I mean, I don't know. Cantwell straight up says, it's a mistake to bring in women and non-whites into the movement. I mean, he wrote that, and I see some of that similar sentiment with Molyneux as far as promoting a pro-white European culture and, this anti-Islam, like the refugees are all bad, just collectivizing people. That's another thing is people don't recognize the hypocrisy of how they're becoming collectivists and just labeling a single group, whether that's people who, Muslims or refugees or just any of these single groups, they're putting them in this big broad category and then again latching onto that fear and then trying to establish some sort of philosophical basis to it. But I don't think it's very sound.
Man, there's so much I want to say in response to that.
Go for it.
They really outdid themselves with this ISIS character this time, didn't they? I mean, of all the boogeymen that government has ever come up with, holy crap, the PR guys have just outdone themselves this time, and it really it has created such a hook in the brain of Western civilization, if you will, that there's this great existential threat. And I guess the point that I've always wanted to make, and maybe it'll be fun to get into this with you, is that if you're a Christian, and I don't mean in the abstract cultural Christ is my role model sense, but a doctrinary, like really, you really need a sort of modifier if you're going to say you're a Christian in that sense. And I respect that, like to say I was raised in the Christian tradition. I like the fictional character of the Christ figure. I think there's a lot of wisdom in the Bible, and I generally then call myself a Christian. I practice the traditions. I don't really, I'm still fundamentally a rationalist. I don't really believe in any of it as magical mythology or the Word of God. Okay, fine. But people who are actually Christian, who believe in magic, who believe in the mythology as history, who are Bible literalists, which is to believe in things that contradict other things, which is to say that you don't really have a great grip on reality. You're not really in a position to address the ISIS problem, because my original theory about Al Qaeda and ISIS is that there was a kind of, the CIA couldn't really fabricate it out of nothing. There is some legitimate base of support for ISIS in pan-Arabism and anti-Westernism, and that is rooted in and given form through religion. And Islam itself is not any more dangerous than Christianity, or and I'll say even Buddhism. And I only mean that not to measure in scale, but as much as I may admire the philosophy or faith of Buddhism, some incredible violence and atrocities have been committed in the name of Buddhism as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there are certain delusions in all of these doctrinary organized religions that lead people to do disgusting, dangerous things. And really, the only people who are capable of addressing ISIS, maybe not ISIS, but addressing the legitimate problem of radical Islam, are those who are able to look at the problem of irrational faith entirely. And there's so much irrationality in the world, and I'd like to think that if as you say, this is kind of a neo-reactionary backlash in the psychological and the cultural sense, is kind of in response to the government trumped-up recent wave of Islamophobia, then then what we're seeing is it's sort of a reactionary spasm that is measured by the depth of delusional thinking, measured by the depth of cultural insecurity, of religious insecurity, of we see in like with gay marriage in the United States, or sexual freedom issues in general, the insecurity about your reproductive strategy driving you to want to control the sexual behaviors of others. I mean, it's sick, but humanity is, again, you step back, you look at all the bigger trends, and it's impossible not to be hopeful as much as you look at the negativity of these issues, that all of the underlying things that drive these are going away. We're evolving past all of the, even the specific forms that we see around us. The general trend, even if in the Muslim world, people aren't becoming non-religious at the same rate as in the Western world. It happens with the penetration of the internet and the information awareness and the sharing of data. I mean, I became at least agnostic. I would describe myself now as a pantheist, but I remember the day. I wish I could put a date on it, but I remember the day when I was in 6th grade social studies at Crocker Middle School in Hillsborough, California, and there were 2 pages in our textbook that summed up all the major world religions in 2 paragraphs each. And I was like, wow, people believe all these crazy contradictory things. They definitely can't all be right. It's got to be a lot more likely that they're all wrong. And, that got me questioning. I think just even that awareness coming to the world is still being realized. It's still, what we're feeling today in this, with the activism that you and I get to do, as easy as it is to get sucked into these negative trends, or to pay attention to this kind of negativity, that we get to feel. And I think you would agree that this is really the ultimate payoff, like why we do what we do, is that you get to be in touch with this beautiful life force energy and feel it evolving, right?
Hell yeah, absolutely. And that's let's move forward with that then, because you're right. There definitely is, I think it's just important to, when these type of things flare up, we absolutely shouldn't ignore those, especially when those type of people still want to wear the label libertarian and call themselves libertarian while espousing such ideas. But as you said, there's plenty of beautiful things happening, and there's, a whole other side to activism and towards using this, the attention of the mainstream and the attention that surrounds these circuses that are the elections. And that's something that you're focusing on, is trying to capture that energy and to, I think, mimic what Ron Paul was able to do in 2008 and 2012, and really just help increase the amount of people who call themselves libertarians, anarchists, or even just those who are open to, liberty as a concept with your planned 2020 presidential election. And I know you just posted something on adamkokesh.com. Is that just sort of like a teaser for an upcoming official launch, or where's your candidacy at this point? I mean, I know it's still early.
Well, there are a lot of people in this movement who share the ideal of a stateless society, and not very many who are looking at practically how to achieve it. And there are lots of people who are analyzing the strategy, but very few who actually see a complete line of progress from here to there. And I think the clearest way that we're able to transition out of statism is to take governments apart from the top down. And there are a number of reasons this is true. I outlay them in the section called Localization in our book Freedom, that's on thefreedomline.com for free in every digital format possible, including audiobook. You can back order paper copies there now. We're sold out. We got our 3rd printing arriving soon. Over 1 million downloads of this book already. And it's really incredible how people have recognized that this is the most, I can't say with certainty how things are going to go in the future, but the most viable option. And I'll just highlight, one of the obvious reasons this is such a powerful method for us as people who are seeking the ideal of a voluntary society is that we can provide immediate value and benefit to people by applying this philosophy. And really that's what it comes down to, how we should be thinking of ourselves if we're going to call ourselves anarcho-capitalists, that it's about exercising your self-ownership as a free human being to provide value for others. And when I think, how do we apply this philosophy? Well, localization is something that lots of people understand the benefits of and see the benefits of. And really, in the United States, we have the most amazing opportunity here to do this because of the structure of the government, of the federal government, and 50 supposedly independent state governments. And most Americans who I talk to, when you put them on the spot, you draw the line in the sand and say, hey, if we had a peaceful transition to the states from the federal government, would you be better off without the federal government entirely? And they go, yeah. And the cool thing is when we pull this off and show people that taking this one massive step in localization leads to such an improvement of quality of life, and they start looking at why, not only do we have the supposed 50 different laboratories of democracies that the founders envisioned, but 50 truly independent countries all rushing to realize the benefits of taking localization even further. And the vision is very simple. In principle, you take part of the federal government and the state governments and the county governments, or in some small counties or cities, or even in some very small states, you can transition directly to nonviolent systems when you get down to the community level, and in places where you can actually submit, private providers to displace government providers in a way that doesn't pull the rug out from underneath anyone. And I think that's an incredible promise of the application of this philosophy. You want to talk about bringing it back to the real world, connecting it to how we move forward. It's not that complicated, and it's not that hard to get people on board. So I came up with this idea, for myself of running for president on the platform of a peaceful, orderly dissolution of the entire federal government over 4 years. Let me think, how long ago was this? About 5 or 6 years ago? And it wasn't so much for me. I've done so much crap in the meantime that, obviously was not in the best interest of someone, trying to gain broad popular support, but I do think at least my record as an activist is a testament to my commitment to my principles. And if it's not me, I have no problem saying that, this campaign is called Freedom 2020. It's not Kokesh 2020. Because if we can, I would be happy to support someone who's a more capable administrator even taking on my position. But until then, I will run until either I win on this platform or someone else does. And this campaign is really about drawing a line in the sand. My original goal was very modest. I'm not even going to say it now, but now that we see what's ahead of us, and having put this out, because I've mentioned this in interviews several times, and people have been asking me about it and telling me how much they're hoping for this. And I talked about it a month or two ago in a Tom Woods interview, and I actually just recently got a hold of the domain adamkokesh.com from a fan who'd been parked on it for a while, and put up this pre-announcement there just to have it in writing. And it says, the most important thing you can do now is wake people up to the nature of government and show them how we can move forward through localization. And one of the most efficient ways to do that is with this book, and I hope you'll share it. It's free. And here's the link. And the response that we got has been just so overwhelmingly positive. We're going to be organizing a national campaign kind of behind the scenes. We're going to be putting a forum together at thefreedomline.com. Right now we have the old app versus the man one up. We're going to be switching that out pretty soon here. And we're going to have 50 state coordinators by the time we start this next tour in the fall. We're going to have another book out by then called Hot, Dirty, and Dangerous about my 7 months in Fallujah in 2004 with the Marine Corps. And we're going to be doing a tour like that with the new book every year. The next one is going to be Freedom for America, which is basically the campaign platform of how we actually take apart the federal government as orderly as possible, how we allow a transition period for states to take on certain, I should say, relevant functions. I don't want to characterize them as more than that, because the point is to allow the people of the states to decide and to give them time to make such a transition. And this is not just an awareness-raising exercise. This is a way of drawing the line in the sand. And if it's going to happen this way, then it's going to happen because right now, people committed to accepting the challenge that I've been issuing for a couple of years now. Since the book came out a year ago, and really in a deeper sense, since I realized that in our activism, we should be challenging ourselves to consider what is the most efficient way we can wake people up, and then do that, because we know that not only is that how we provide the most value to those around us, but how we provide the most value to the world by achieving this tipping point and a paradigm shift as soon as possible. And it's not because we did more navel gazing as a movement, and it's not because you read another book on monetary policy. It's because you learn to talk to people around you about things that you care about. And we are going to provide with this campaign not just a line in the sand and a plan, but a truly open source opportunity for people to connect with those around them based on this message. And what we have now to be able to accomplish by 2020, I know how I don't mean to be delusional about how far we have to go. There are really only just 1 million of us in America now, less than 1/3%. But I don't see this movement slowing down. If anything, it is accelerating. And I might be wrong on my timeline. I might have to run again in 2024 or 2028. Or maybe someone else will be carrying the torch in 2032 running on this platform. And, I'm happy to support whoever can put together the most viable campaign with this. But I'm getting started now. And there are a lot of people who are standing with me to say that this is worth doing. This is a line in the sand that will wake people up, that can make real change happen. Well, and I might be wrong about some of my presumptions, but I think we can make this happen eventually.
I want to unpack a little bit of what you said there, because definitely, now we've given you a chance to talk about what the ideas behind that. And we've had conversations, and we've talked about this at Liberty Fest in October, and we've talked about this on the phone. And, ever since you first started talking about this, I sort of expressed what I felt like, just the limited nature of it, but also the benefits. And I will say, before I get into this next, my next sort of a response to what you just said, that this morning I sort of had a light go off in my head, because I have been, opposing this idea of yours on several fronts, which I'm going to mention here in just a moment. Points that I do think are worth mentioning and are still valid. But at the same time, as far as, when we were talking at Liberty Fest, you were talking about the size of the movement and how long it'll take us to get it from, where we're at now is to growing to, 5 million plus or whatever, and how that maybe will take, who knows how long, let's say 10 to 15 years, but perhaps, a campaign of what you're planning, if it's successful in the ways that Ron Paul's 2 campaigns were to spread these ideas, then, that could increase the size, that could have a jump that, we wouldn't have seen without that. And overall, I think when you're looking at it in terms of that, like, are we able to grow this message? Are there going to be more people who are going to be researching these ideas, and then not only researching them, but applying them based on seeing what you're doing and seeing the way that you're trying to lead your life, as well as trying to run for president? And from that standpoint, again, like I do think I can support it on that, in the same way that whenever Ron Paul ran, because I personally don't identify as an anarcho-capitalist, and I've always had a problem with that word for reasons that are probably a whole other podcast. But I consider myself.
I'm with you. It's just another label.
Yeah, I consider myself an individualist anarchist if I got to give myself a label. And there's I got some viewpoints on economics and things in there, but for the most part, I want to work with other free individuals and build communities from that standpoint. But I know that there are people who will hear this message and who will grow from it. And so again, as I'm reflecting on it, I'm like, well, because I'd made a post a few weeks back just saying something along the lines like, just FYI, I'm already against Kokesh 2020, sort of making a joke. And it created a lot of discussion about it, where people were saying, hey, I think this is a win. I think, I think this is a waste. It's going to be a waste of time. And so there was, I got to hear both sides and different people's viewpoints, people that I respect as well. And some of these I've brought to you before, but a couple of them that I wanted to make, and some of them are more philosophical and just being a purist, as far as, we've both been proponents of agorism, agorism for the last 5 years or so, 4 or 5 years. And as far as getting people to look into Samuel Konkin and the New Libertarian Manifesto and the idea of building outside of the state and counter economics and building those counter institutions as we watch the state's unsustainable system, collapse, and at the same time hasten that collapse by spreading the ideas. And even within New Libertarian Manifesto, not that, of course, that's like some Bible that is the be-all, end-all of strategy, but I do think it's helpful. But even within that, Samuel Konkin talked about the importance and the need for what he called anti-politicking and, running campaigns to spread messages and things like that. So I have, on one standpoint, I feel like, after Ron Paul in 2012 and it turned a bunch of people into anarchists, I was really excited because, as I was saying earlier, I supported him in the sense that if somebody said they were interested in the 2012 election or the 2008 election, I said, hey, here's this guy you should look into. I never registered to vote. I didn't vote for him. I didn't tell anybody to vote for him. But whenever I, would meet somebody who was still in that realm, I would say, hey, well, look, there's not just these two, whack jobs. Maybe you should check out this other guy. He's got some important things to say. And from that standpoint, I could see myself in 2020, again, if I have friends and family who are still holding on, which I hope, and hope that they're not holding on, because I guess this is what's getting to my frustration, is that Ron Paul created a bunch of anarchists. I thought that people were ready to let go of that, and then Rand Paul comes and people start thinking like it's going to be Rand Paul, and now there's still some of those folks holding on to hopes about Rand Paul, and some of those people have jumped on to supporting Trump, and I just feel like a Freedom 2020, Kokesh 2020 run, it gets those same people who might be willing and ready to let go of the electoral system and electoral politics and put their energy, say, into homesteading or earthships or, building intentional, sustainable communities built on these principles. They might be like, well, you know what? Let me give it one more shot. 4 more years, I can put my energy back into the system for Kokesh. He's always done good work. I support him. He's going to do it where people have never been able to do it before, And again, with already mentioned.
Hold on. Can I just
go ahead.
Before you move on to the next one, I want to challenge you on a little bit of something, because I've never been anti-politics. I've never been against participation. I've just been of the opinion that, I should say, I've come to the conclusion that most of it is a waste of time when you consider what is of the greatest value of, actually achieving a free society. So, obviously, you would concede, and I think you already did in a sense, that just getting those people back into the matrix to pull more people out is a worthwhile exercise. But I think, I've always said that when there is a good opportunity to participate in a political process, that, to show that there is a consensus towards reducing the power of the state, then you should participate. Not that you have a duty or an obligation, but it's a potential to provide value for the world to say, hey, there's consensus here. And if you would say that there's none, how would you analyze the recent quasi-legalization of marijuana through ballot measures and of the electoral process in a lot of places? But
we both know that was driven by the culture way before the state actually caught up.
Sure, but when the state is so divorced from the culture, like the culture is now ahead of the state and goes, no, this marijuana legalization thing is crap, or illegal, war on drugs thing is crap, we're going to come out and vote and just show that there's a consensus so that the police will actually stop doing this and government will stop enforcing this. At that point, isn't it worth coming out to vote?
Yeah, I definitely, again, I read something, I can't remember who it was, but it was a good account of whether or not, basically it put that same position, if people are able to, this is actually the debate we're having right here. This is what, the answer you just gave is what Rothbard responded to Konkin when Konkin, proposed something similar. And Rothbard said, well, what about when there's slaves and, they get to vote on different master, and one of the master beats the shit out of them all the time, and the other, will let slaves go after a year, and the conditions are, better. Is it is that an act of violence, or is that immoral or wrong for those slaves to then vote in those circumstances to give themselves obviously an easier time? And again, I would say no. And Konkin's response basically was to that. It was just kind of to laugh at the assumption that, the slaves would think that that getting a better master is still a win when they could just practice counter economics and go to the Underground Railroad and escape outside without using the state itself. And that's in that example. So, but I mean, I do think that, if we can get together and, for instance, if now people can smoke pot without having to be in a fear of losing their jobs or getting jail time in Colorado and other places, that, I'll call that a win. I mean, I definitely think, again, the culture shifts way ahead of time, and those of us who are willing and able to take the risk to be in the black and the gray markets to kind of be the drivers of that culture through agorist methods, we see the change way ahead before those who are working within the confines of the state do. But again, having compassion to those who don't have the ability to live in the sort of illegalist black and gray lifestyle, then I think that's a win when we can lessen the oppression on people across the board.
Yeah, and about this campaign, the objective isn't to win at all costs. The objective is to build a consensus that we would be better off without the entire federal government, and someone should go take it apart and send everyone home. And present an orderly process for doing that doesn't lead to any kind of upheaval and addresses everyone's fears about a possible transition. And frankly, I don't know what's going to happen when we get to that consensus. But I know that that's an incredible tipping point. And when we get to a global consensus that we can actually start here in the United States of localizing government deliberately, I think what we do is start the actual process of getting government out of the way so that people really can live like that, so that becomes the default, not something that you have to, I need to say struggle for, because we don't struggle having escaped the matrix. We thrive, but without the challenges that the state presents. I think we get that a lot sooner as a result of this. So, and it takes, one of the problems with this is a lot of people say, well, you gotta start locally. You gotta do this. You gotta run here. You gotta, be elected a city dog catcher first, and then work your way up through the system. And it's like, no, that's not what this is about. It really has to happen from the top down. It has to happen from a general social consensus, and you have to have someone, and I'm just really fortunate enough to be in a position now to have enough of a following and a national network already, and people who have, enough faith in my credibility and my integrity to organize a campaign like this. And it is a great mechanism, as you point out, of bringing this message and making it more relevant for people and connecting it to practical policy. And, I used to say this about Ron Paul, and no one did more as an independent campaigner really for Ron Paul than I did. I shouldn't say that. There are certainly a handful of star stand-ups who outdid me. But, organizing veterans for Ron Paul and everything. And I used to say that if you go knock on your neighbor's door and say, hey, I've got this new philosophy, and I want to tell you all about this and get you into, homesteading and all these other, ways of interacting with the state, they're going to slam the door in your face. But if you go and say, hey, do you care who your next president is? Let me show you this. Oh, and by the way, here's why I'm supporting this guy. And the reason this is important to me is because I drink raw milk, and I don't like the way that the police state is spying on me. And I don't. Oh, okay. And then you can connect it to people's basic fears and needs and feelings in a way that not only connects with what's already relevant to them, but gives them not just a distant vision, but an immediate steps on how to get there, whether they're right or wrong. The worst thing we can do is stand still.
No, I agree with that.
And while we are evolving, while we see these, we would strongly agree on these beautiful natural processes underlying human development and human evolution at this amazing point in human history. You can't stand still on that. People have to bring this alive and make it real and make it happen. And, you definitely cannot do that in isolation or in a circular conversation, or a deeper conversation. We need to take this relatively thin understanding of freedom and spread it far and wide and let it continue to deepen over time rather than, holding it amongst ourselves and turning it into this, intellectual debate club or even, a homesteading enthusiasts group, because there's so many people who really are trapped, who will not get out of the matrix until the walls are paper thin and they can walk right through them. There are people who are weak. There are people who are afraid. There are people who are disabled, who are, disadvantaged by their circumstances, who are not capable of seeing what you and I see and what so many other activists in the movement are able to, embody in their lifestyle. And, we need to create a broader understanding in order to help all of those people as well.
No, absolutely. And I agree with you as far as I'm definitely am not advocating. I think anybody who pays attention to my activism would clearly see this, that I'm not advocating insulating yourself, isolating yourself, being inactive. And, if anything, localization and being involved in community building has been something that's been prominent as a part of my activism since the very beginning, since 2010. I want to focus on two other areas of this.
I didn't mean to insinuate that.
No, I know you're not.
I didn't mean to insinuate that about different avenues of activism, because I've done all kinds. And, anything that gets people engaged and out and connecting with other people, and off of message boards, that's, I'm all for that.
Absolutely. So I want to talk, though, two more things that I don't even necessarily want to say that they're disagreements, just but more questions that I want to pose to you before we actually get to some things I want to close up with, that more areas that we agree upon and that I think are important to the lifestyle that I think both of us are going towards, and that your campaign is going to do a great job of highlighting. But the first sort of questions I have here are, I think that I've heard numbers around $5 million or so in order to get the nomination for the Libertarian Party. Is there a better use of $5 million rather than obtaining a nomination to a campaign that we can pretty much say will not be successful, at least on the first one, if success is measured by winning?
I'm not committed to the Libertarian Party as much as I am to building a campaign and providing a way for people to wake others up. I'm a member of the Libertarian Party. I'm a lifetime member. I'm at least nominally now the head of the Libertarian Party in Yavapai County, Arizona. But a party is a means to an end, and I think the people in the party would appreciate that. So if there's an opportunity to do this within the party in a way that doesn't require a significant diversion of resources and pays us back more in terms of using that platform and that nomination, then we would go that way. But I'm not like somebody, pretty much everybody I should say everybody, Gary Johnson is a good exception actually, but most of the Libertarian Party candidates have been doing the opposite of what I'm doing, where they're saying, I'm going to work within the party, I'm going to get good with the delegates, and, then I'm going to use the party once I get nominated at the convention throughout the country to help my campaign. And that's not what I'm doing. I'm doing we're going to build an organization, we're going to build a campaign, I'm going to build an independent base of support. And I would say this is somewhere, I still have an advantage over Gary Johnson with a much broader national base of support, and be able to put that into, an organization that is going to be able to grow over the next 5 years. And then if it is, synergistic and appropriate, and it's good for the party, and the party is welcoming of the campaign, then, ballot access makes more sense that way. And there's no one else, there are a lot of, other great activists who might be running for that nomination. So, that's also up in the air, but I very much appreciate what you said. And as someone who, I'd certainly be asking a lot of the people who are listening to this to be involved and in their own way, be supportive. It's a very important question to ask, and one that I don't think was asked enough of. I'll just say a lot of campaigns in the past of how is this money being spent, and is it really being spent efficiently? And at least for the majority of the time, the money that is raised by this. The campaign doesn't even exist yet on paper. There's no, exploratory committee. There's no bank account. But the money will be spent to support the people who are making the most of this message, to wake people up and build a movement this way. That the campaign element of it is secondary to the activism element of it. I hope that would at least show that I'm being very conscientious of this, and that I'm happy to say that money donated to anything I've been asking people to support has been very well spent.
Awesome. One last question on the campaign stuff before I move to our last topic. What do you think of, or have you had time to look into John McAfee? And I think just the other day he announced that for 2016 that he's going to pursue the Libertarian Party nomination. A couple months ago, he announced he was going to run for president, and he was doing it under the creation of something he was calling the Cyber Party, and really pushing cybersecurity. But I think from a realistic standpoint, not like government fear campaign cybersecurity, but actual security. And was talking about. I mean, he had some really radical ideas, and I was actually reading an interview with him recently. He didn't go as far as what you're saying, but he was willing to say in an interview that the Constitution already allows the people to dissolve the government, and if that is necessary, if he became president, he would consider such an option.
Yeah, and I'm excited by his campaign. I'm excited by his candidacy. I've read some of the columns that he's written recently, mostly on cybersecurity type issues, and they're very insightful. And I'm excited to welcome him to the conversation. I think what you said, that he might consider that. So, a certain lack of direction or philosophical grounding, and that's a criticism that people like you and me are pretty casual about leveling at a lot of people, but for a presidential candidate, that's something that's extremely important. And I hope he learns a lot from this process. I think for him, this campaign, as I've seen it unfold, is kind of a learning experience for him, and I'm really happy to see that. I'm also hoping that Gary Johnson has gone through significant philosophical evolution over the last 4 years, from being kind of a real, obviously
he's not a libertarian.
He's not a libertarian. He's a principled minarchist with great principles and absolute integrity. And that's enough for me to want to support him. For me to tell people, I'd be happy for you to vote for him. I guess I could say I feel the same way about McAfee.
Awesome. Well, so one of the other things I want to talk with you about, and this is something that's been, you talked about the Homestead Workshop, and I think that's kind of on the hold for now. But I know that you have plans to you already went to the Earthship Academy, so you're learning more sustainability and how to take care of yourself. And I've been really spending the last 6 months or so just nerding out and doing so much research into not only the American anarchist strains, but really just studying radical movements all around the world, from communism, socialism, anarchism, and every little ism that connects them, so that I can have not only a broader and deeper understanding of those who espouse views that I don't agree with, but my own viewpoints. And again, as far as talking about labels earlier, I really started wanting to understand, well, where do I fit in this whole grand scheme, and what does make sense to me? Not just simply buying the same things that, because we run in certain circles, people just assume, oh, well, those guys believe that theory or that part of the philosophy, so I must agree with it as well. And really challenging myself in a lot of ways, and it's been rewarding. But I've also been reading this book most recently called Men Against the State, and it really studies the early American individualist anarchists, from Josiah Warren all the way, through Spooner and Tucker. And Josiah Warren is somebody that I feel, if you haven't read his work, man, definitely look into it, because for me, I have a vision, and building with the idea of freedom cells that John Bush in Austin, Texas, and, of course, We've heard the idea from Bob Podolsky talking about his octalogs and stuff, but the idea of building community and centering around a group of individuals, 8 to 10 individuals, and starting with these projects, we've really been developing and trying to put these theories into practice and just testing them out. And in 2017 to 2018, we're projecting that we'll be able to get some land somewhere in Texas and start building these communities, documenting every aspect and showing how these principles can be put into action, how we can become more sustainable, how we can exit the matrix, and at the same time build entrepreneurship opportunities for us as individuals so we can become sustainable and really have that economy outside the state. And Josiah Warren did plenty of great work in that. He actually started the first intentional communities in the United States and really in the world. He had the first American anarchist newsletter called The Peaceful Revolutionist, and his journals document his entire life of creating communities. He created one called Utopia, one called Modern Times, and he really studied all these different aspects of it. So they're just rich with information. And for one, he spent some time in some communities that were more on the side of communism as far as the collective being put above the individual. And after coming out of that experience, before he created his own communities, he said that he felt like that was the biggest failing of these communities, is that they went against nature by placing the community and the collective's needs above the individuals, and so that stunted their growth. So there's just tons of great knowledge in there. That, I think, is a good starting point, and I'm seeing that there's this revival of that, because in Warren's time, the U.S. was still this, frontier. There was still a lot of land to explore, so there was a lot of homesteading. It was natural to do that, and the people saw the state becoming centralized and growing, and they were trying to find ways to show people that there were other systems, other models that they could use outside of the ones that were being established. And of course, they were successful, that the word lives on, and people like me are discovering and passing these ideas on, but the state has grown. And I hear you talk about localization. I saw it on the AdamKokesh.com post, the importance of localization and spreading the message. And I feel like when you take the ideas of Konkin and agorism, which don't necessarily, focus on the local, but they talk about, he looks at from the societal standpoint of going from statism towards freedom or towards agorism, and the different stages and, ideas for how you can build outside of the counter economy. That's something that I'm in the middle of developing the theory of that, but also looking at another activist who was active around the same time, Karl Hess, who he did a similar thing. He went to this small neighborhood in Washington, D.C. He built rooftop gardens. He, went into the community, worked with the community, didn't just come and colonize it, like an outsider. He came in and saw what their needs were, how he could work with them, and really just transformed this place and just started teaching people skill shares and just trying to empower people. And he wrote a book called Community Technology, reflecting on that experience as well. I'm in the process of getting that one. But I feel like when you combine these ideas of agorism, working to build the counter economy into building the future, not simply focusing solely on voting or solely on playing the political game or, isolating yourself or just doing nothing, but building that future rather than waiting for the government's help or assuming that it's going to, be reformed somehow, and combine that with the localization of Karl Hess's ideas and what you're talking about, then we really have some foundation for some powerful philosophy and strategy that people, I think, will be able to employ in the coming years. And that's where my mind has been, where my focus is. And I just want to get your thoughts on that and give you a chance to elaborate on, your ideas of localization.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I think there's an important distinction that is people are becoming aware of, between trying to tell people how to live in a commune sense versus showing people how to live based on their own experience in a self-empowering way. And that's definitely more what I'm going towards, although my situation, I'm engaged, and my fiance and I want to build our own house, we want to buy land. We travel a ridiculous amount. When we travel, we're surrounded by people, so being isolated and having a property to ourselves is not a problem for our home base. So based on that, we're creating a house. I went to the Earthship Academy, and you know what hydroponics is?
Yeah.
You know what aquaponics is?
Yeah.
You know what an Earthship is with a built-in greenhouse? So imagine an Earthship-inspired sapioponic house. And if you can figure that out, you can figure out what we're going to be building. But it is a bit of a leap architecturally and conceptually for what housing can do in terms of efficiently providing a sustainable living environment for humans. And we're really excited about this. And so for me, the step back with the homesteading workshop was more out of humility and wanting to not overpromise and underdeliver, and really having my logistics in order before starting to talk about the specifics of things. So we're looking to buy property near Ashford, Arizona. We got a piece picked out. We should be moving in within the next month and starting to build. And if the house is mostly done by the summer and we look like we're on track, we do want to host a workshop out there and be able to bring together a lot of the experts, do a video series, and really what I think is for us in the way that we're doing this is that it takes a certain leap. And for us, it's actually been easier because we've been living out of an RV trailer for the last now year and 3 months. As you know, we've been, for the American Campfire Freedom Tour, we did 6 months straight on the road doing an event every other day or every third day, and sometimes, for stretches every other day. And in Florida, we did 10 events in 10 days straight. I think we averaged actually better than every other day for 6 months for events. And I guess it would only be 90 events if it was every other day. It was actually a little more than that. It was like 110 events in 6 months. And we did a warm-up tour, and we've done a lot of other events that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise because we've been mobile. And when you have a good reason to, it's awesome. There are a lot of people retiring to a mobile lifestyle, and I think we kind of discount that as a form of homesteading, but it really is a cool way to take charge of your life. To say, obviously, if you're burning a lot of gas, it's not the ideal, for sustainability, but it is a really cool alternative lifestyle that people are embracing now, especially in retirement. And it wasn't until the end of the tour I went through this phase of feeling awkward, like, oh, no, we got a few months before we're getting on this land, and I'm just a guy living in a trailer, and being like, wow, this is really awesome. I have a very comfy space that I can take anywhere and, do anything with, and it's really been amazing. So now we're going to be living the American dream, what to me at least is the new American dream, which is you buy a trailer, you go park it on some land, and build yourself a house, build yourself a homestead. So that's what we're doing. We're hoping that this summer we can host a workshop. And, I don't know if it's going to be a week or a weekend or a month, but it's definitely something that is an important part of my message, at least in terms of, hey, and by the way, here's the philosophy, but by the way, here's the lifestyle.
Absolutely.
And how can we live as much as we can? How do we live by these values? So we just do it.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a great point. When we were talking before, you mentioned that idea of just how, when it comes time for your presidential run, again, even if we have maybe some strategic differences, I think that it will play in your favor absolutely to have you living the lifestyle. Just like with anything, people respond to action and not just to words. Yeah. So when you can show them that you're living the lifestyle, like, hey, this isn't just some guy talking about radical ideas. This is a guy that's living them. That's going to be huge. Yeah, man, I appreciate your time today. Anything you want to add before we end it for today?
No, well, I already weaseled in a couple pitches for the book, so I think we got that covered. I'll just give in one last reminder to ask people to check it out, thefreedomline.com, and you can check out my YouTube channel from there as well. And we're going to be getting into regular production again soon. We've got some more books coming, like I said, our third printing in about a week here, and we're going to be getting out some free copies. So please sign up for the email list, and you won't miss any of those announcements.
All right, thank you, Adam Kokesh.